Thanks for coming, first of all. Great turnout, new faces, good to see. A special talk tonight, a very special guest, we have Arthur, and he's got an amazing story. He's joined he was going to get into his story anyway, but basically very successful in the police. He's organised a lot of big operations, commanded a lot of big areas in the cops, and he's done it with his faith, and there's challenges in that, as we're going to get into. And Father, if you want to start us off with a prayer.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Amen. All of us together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Take a seat, please. So first of all, Arthur, thanks for coming. I know you're a busy guy.
Thanks for having me, and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out.
Definitely. We've got some faces from Mascot here. We have Peter back. This is awesome. I guess we'll start, maybe you can introduce yourself a little if you like. I don't know if I missed anything else you want to introduce yourself with?
Yep, you probably all know my name is Arthur Katsogiannis. I was a member of the New South Wales Police Force for 38 years. I joined in 1980 and I retired at the beginning of 2019. Before that, I studied accountancy at university and was an accountant working with chartered accountants. And I remember my poor old mum, who'd be rolling in the grave now, said to me, "Ias que espudas diz que a dona passa isso na minha." So you've gone and studied accountancy, been an accountant, now you're going to join the police force. What's happened to you? But after all these years, I do believe I made the right decision. And the journey's been very interesting, very difficult. But what I can tell you that, as Christ said, if you've got faith, you can move mountains. So nothing's impossible with our Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ.
That's for sure. When you joined the police after accounting, I'm guessing you're still a young guy.
I was 20 years old.
Yeah. Did you have the same faith you have now in your life then when you joined?
No.
Okay. Interesting.
Look, when I was younger, my dad was on the Simvulio at one of the churches out at St Mary's. We lived at that time before we moved to Greece. And he used to take me to church. I was a little papagaki, you can call it that, little altar boy, take the candles around. So I was introduced to the church at an early age. But I had a little bit of faith, but I really didn't go to church regularly. Once I left and went to work, I was going out into the, I wouldn't say I was a darky just yet, but going out as normal young people do like yourself, going out to those days we had the nightclubs and the discos and you'd go out and enjoy yourself with your friends. I was playing football at the time. I ended up playing President's Cup with Western Suburbs. And I also then I got into bodybuilding, and I actually competed a number of times and won a few titles, the Australasian, Mr New South Wales, Mr South Pacific. So I did all that when I was a young guy. And then through a friend of mine, I won't mention any names because some of you might know him, he came over one night to dinner and he brought me over a Bible, paraphrased Bible, and he said to me, "Arthur, just take this," he said, read it 5 minutes every night if you can do that. He said it'll help change your life. And I said, "All right, I'll do it." So the first night I read it, and I started reading Revelations, and ended up reading the whole chapter. And from that day on, something came over me to start changing my life around.
What were some of those maybe beginning changes you made? Because a lot of us now at our age, I guess we're looking maybe at what changes we could make. Maybe just an example to what kind of things change in your life.
Look, it's difficult to say because everyone's different. You make little changes. For me, it was about trying to find out what the truth was. It was difficult in those days because I didn't have a lot of interaction with priests, as probably many of you would these days. And I think there's a lot more the police chaplains here, the younger priests who you can go and talk to. We didn't have that back then. I'm talking about now, 40 years ago. It was different. It was a different era, if I can say that. But I tried to make little changes in my life. I did speak and get advice from a friend of mine who was in the church at the time, became a monk. And he gave me a lot of spiritual advice and helped me along to make little changes. Because I actually, before that, I remember speaking to him. I said, look, I'm not really a bad person. I'm not doing A, B, and C. But I didn't realise till many, many years later that even the little things that I was doing that I thought were okay were really not okay. And it's okay as young people. I think for all of us, we're growing up, and it's important that we mature, but learn things and do changes slowly. Because if you try, just like if you want to lose weight, if you try and want to lose weight very quickly, it won't work, and you'll put that weight back on just as quick as what you lost it. So, but if you do it in an orderly fashion, if you do it slowly, learn a little bit about your faith, and then change slowly, I think you've got a better chance to maintain it over the long term. But it's not going to be easy. You young people now have probably, in my view, the most difficult time around, because I think we're living in a very, very difficult and, if I can say, without putting you off, evil and corrupt age. And I've seen all of it, from corruption to a lot of evil. And I remember, I used to say to my wife, Emilia, that some of you may know, who supported me, and found her it had been very difficult to do some of the things I did in the police force, and I'll speak about that a little bit later. But it's, as I said, I used to come home. I didn't tell her too much about work, but I just said to Emilia, I said, if you knew what's going on in the world, if people really knew what was going on, I'd say they just fall over. They won't believe it.
I mean, you spent 38 years in the course. I only spent maybe 2 years. And even in those 2 years, you can see that evil is very much out there. Like, very much so. There's people with evil intent, and God will judge them accordingly. But I guess as your career as a police officer, how did you, not pass judgment, but how did you conduct your duties? I guess in a way where you were still thinking in a Christian perspective. Did you have to, was it a conscious thing, a conscious effort to try to practice as a Christian while in the place seeing all this evil?
Look, I think for me what it was about is making sure that we treated people fairly and allowed justice to do its thing rather than trying to treat people deplorably. And probably some of you may or may not have had interaction with some of the younger police. And police are only human beings like the rest of us. They're an extension of society. So the way that some of the people in society respond will be obviously some police officers will respond the same way. But what I tried to really consciously do, especially in the later years, the last 20 or so years when I really became stronger in my faith, is try to make sure that justice was done, that my police officers were interacting and treating people properly, made sure that we were following up with people that may have needed help. And I guess for me it was about how I can help the community, but also at the same time take the bad people off the streets and protect the community and the younger people, because there's a lot of evil people out there, if I can put it that way, especially doing some terrible things to young people, drugs, shootings, and a whole host of, I can go through many, many things. So it was important to protect the community, but also to make sure that people were treated fairly.
And obviously you would have worked with other police officers who didn't have these same views, right? And how did you navigate that, I suppose? Because everyone, remember, it doesn't have to be the police. You can be in any workforce, as we all know, and you can be dealing with and having to work with people who, like even evil people in the, who you have to work with, even in the cops, I'm sure you've seen it, So how did you navigate that realm of it? Because you're dealing with bad people, your customers, let's say, but then some of your colleagues, I'm sure, didn't share the same views. Was that something where you had to keep a distance, or I know there's some people who, they have a distance with their colleagues, or they try their best, and sometimes you fall as well because you are maybe trying to gel together, and you end up doing some of the things as well that maybe you didn't want to in the first place.
Look, for me it was a bit easier because I was a police commander for about 20 years, and I was probably one of the youngest commanders promoted at the time, and I had a high profile in the police force, so for me it was people knew who I was. I would never deny my faith to anyone, so they took the package as it came, and I wouldn't bend my waist for anybody else. So most people knew what I was like, so they wouldn't approach me to do anything else. I stood my ground when I had to stand my ground, and again, you have to be an example, because one of the things is if you're a high-profile person, whether it be in government, whether it be in the private industry, whether it be as an entertainer, whatever you may be, and you're an Orthodox Christian, you're a Christian, and people know that, you've got to be a good example at all times, because they're always looking to find faults with you, and always trying to see at the moment that you do something that's not right, they'll be the first ones to criticise you. So it was important to portray the example that you are doing the right thing. And it went as far as I spoke to a friend of mine, just to give you an example. I won't mention who the crook was because he's dead now. He got shot, but
Did you shoot him?
No, I wasn't me. Of course, he was other crooks. But he was at somebody's place who knows me, and he said that such and such was there. This guy, he's one of the, you'd all know him if I mention his name, but I won't. He said that, he said to this particular crook that he said, oh, I know Arthur Katsogiannis. And I'm only telling you this because this guy told me this later. It sort of made an impression on me in terms of, okay, this is why it's good to be a good example. And he said, yeah, we know him, or know of him, because I've never met this particular crook. And he said, yeah, we know of him. He says, he's one of the good guys, someone you can trust. So I thought, that's coming from a really bad guy. I said, so must be doing something right. And portraying that image was very important.
What was your position in the cops at that time when that happened?
I think at that stage I was the commander of the gang squad. So I had interaction with people like him. And, that was a very difficult period of time for me, gang squad. We had, when I first took over, we had a lot of shootings. We had the Nomads and the Hells Angels were having a war between each other. And there was a lot of shootings going on. I was getting phone calls in the middle of the night. My poor old wife couldn't sleep, so I had to go to another room and answer the phone and go out on call-outs. There was a lot of problems. We had the Comanchero also at war with the Bandidos because they were fighting over internal grievances. There was patching over. There was drug distributions in different territories. There was a lot of issues. What you've got to understand, and you wouldn't be aware because you weren't around in those days, you were all very young, but in the old days, the outlaw motorcycle gangs had a code of honour. I'd say code of honour. They had to go for an apprenticeship when they joined, had to be associates, had to prove themselves, and they'd come in, and it was very difficult to actually become a member of these groups. Nowadays, it's very easy to switch over because the new generation of bikies, they're only after numbers so they can have the position of power, and so they can go over and forcibly take over territory, do intimidation. I can tell you firsthand, because I've seen it with my own eyes, there is nothing glamorous, cool or sexy about being a bikie. Don't look at the stuff you see on TV because it's completely opposite. They're very violent, they're criminals, they bash and kill each other as well. And I can tell you, if you're going to go and join, as they call them, nominees, you're going to be, all you'll be is a slave. They can ring you up at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, listen, Joe, I want you to go out and give me a packet of cigarettes. If you didn't do it, they'd bash you. So this is the type of environment that you're in. And they do a lot of very, very bad things, which I won't talk about tonight. But they're criminals, they're very violent, and they're nothing like they're portrayed to be. So my advice to all young people is stay away from them, because a lot of them, I do know, they go out and they try to speak to younger people, particularly in gyms. For those who goes and train in gyms, and do try and actively recruit people. So many of them are on steroids, peptides, and all those other drugs, and it's not a great lifestyle. You laughing there, George? I can see you laughing there. You find it funny?
I think he's a recent one. He's been approached a few times or something. Yeah, it's interesting. Like you said, these so obviously they're very organised criminals. We're talking about serious criminals here. They're not mucking around. And they respected you because you were, like you said, that little story you gave. Because do you think that's because of your faith and the way you portrayed yourself as a Christian?
Look, there's a couple of sides to that. Yes, and then there's the other side of it. And I don't talk about it very often, but because it's been out in the public arena, I'll mention it tonight. I won't go into all the jobs. There was a big job we did with the Milpera chapter of the Comanchero, and through a number of means, and I won't mention them because we can't, covert means, we took down the whole chapter, including the president, who was a very violent man, so 15 of them that we ended up arresting and charging. We did a search warrant on the clubhouse. We took away their motorbikes, a lot of money, and we ended up locking them up, and half of them got bail refused, including the president. And as you know, I can tell you this part of it, obviously one of the lines of inquiry that we had with having their phones off, and the next day a couple of my detectives called me and said, "Boss, you better come and have a look at this and listen to this." And they were, because I did the stand-up on the news the day after we got the chapter shut down, and they were talking about, we've got to get rid of this guy, call me all sorts of names. And 2 days later, one of my sergeants was called out by one of our informants. When I say informants, the police work a lot with informants, and I can tell you, these so-called tough guy bikies always ratted on each other. And we had a lot of informants within the gangs itself who gave us information, and we were able to prevent a lot of crimes. But one of the informants said, "Look, you better go and warn your boss." He said that there's been a contract taken out on his life, and it's $500,000, and they paid $250,000 up front. And he mentioned the guy, and I know who it is. Luckily, he's back in jail at the moment. So that was a bit of turmoil in my life, and I know I was very concerned for my wife. We had the police special branch come out and do a whole, full assessment on my house. Basically said to me, "You've got to leave, go somewhere else and live." I said, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying here. And I remember after that, the commissioner, I think I was one of the only ones who'd done it for at that stage, gave me exemption to carry my firearm around, the Glock pistol, off duty as well, which is a no-no. You've got to have the permission of the commissioner to do that, which I did. But I remember bringing it up on the first night, up to my room, and I remember Amelia said to me, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" She said, "Aren't you a man of faith?" And that really tested my faith, because I thought, well, I used to check my car every morning going out, because I know they can put bombs there, the whole host of things. So it was a very difficult time. I had to get all my children off social media, I had to get all our licenses and details suppressed, so nobody could find us. And so it was a very difficult period of time, but with God's help, we got through it all. And I said to her, "You're right." I said, see, nothing happens, if I can say this to all of you, and I've learned two very important things from my experience over time, especially with my faith, is that nothing happens by accident. So everything that happens, God allows it. So whatever reason it may be, and it's always for our benefit, although we don't realise at the time. And God will never allow anything to happen to you that you can't deal with. So never feel overwhelmed. You'll always be able to deal. It might be overwhelming one day, but then the next day you might find that things are settled down. So God's always testing us, and it's important that we stand up and face that test. And also what Evan said earlier about how do you find working with your colleagues. When we're Orthodox Christians, we like to be with Orthodox Christians and our own people, so we can talk to each other, we have an understanding, we've got the same faith. You've got to understand that, and this is where difficult you're going to find getting into the workforce, is that people who aren't faithful or might be atheists who don't care about religion, they want people of like-mindedness to be with them. So if you think you're going to go out there and you're going to have to confess your faith like I did, don't expect promotions, don't expect extra money, don't expect special favours, because they're our sacrifices for our faith. So it's very important to remember that, because that's the world we live in. That's the reality. So be mindful of it, but that's a great way for all of us to express our faith. So, well, we don't want that. What are we living for? We're living to please Christ, not living to please men, because I can tell you, if you're living to please other people, you'll regret it. I've seen it happen to many friends of mine, and because they wanted to please others, in the end, if something happens, other people will turn away from you, just like as quick as the wind changes direction.
Did you have a spiritual father at the time? Like you got these threats and stuff like that. Did you have because we talk a lot about having a spiritual father here, like a priest you can confess to, talk to about these things. Did you have that guidance at the time?
I did. I had my spiritual father at the time was, many of you might know him, Father Stephanos from Bandanasa Monastery. And he was a very wise man, and he gave me a lot of guidance. But I guess going further than that, I was pretty fortunate at the time. I had to go to Canada for work, and whilst I was over there, I decided that one Friday I told the Canadian police, I said, look, I won't be around this weekend, I've got to go and visit somebody. And they say, who? So I had booked myself a flight out of, I was in Ottawa, and flew from Ottawa to Arizona, which is only a 4-hour flight. And I went to the monastery of Elder St. Anthony's Monastery, that's right, for Elder Frem, for those who may not have heard of Elder Frem. He's now since passed away, but a saintly man. And I was very fortunate to meet him. And I wanted to meet him because there's a number of things I wanted to discuss him, as well as the fact that at that stage I was thinking of leaving the police force. I was in two minds: what am I doing here? Why am I still doing this job? The stress and pressures, look at the issues it's caused my life. I brought some dangers onto my family. So I had the opportunity to meet him, and he was a very small man, and he spoke very quietly, very softly, didn't say very much. Was very direct in answering your question. But one of the things I noticed when I walked in there in Arizona, it's funny how things happen. I said to you, things happen for a reason. Nothing happens unless God allows it. Is that there were so many people there waiting all over the world, like Russians, Romanians, Americans who had converts, so many people waiting to see him. They all wanted to go in for confession and speak to him. And I was in this group, and he had his deacon secretary up there, and I said to the deacon, I said, look, Father, I'm here from Australia, I'm working over in Canada, this is who I am. I said, is it possible, I can see a lot of people waiting here, is it possible to see yellow ducks? I said, I won't be able to come back. He said, just have a seat down, he said, and we'll work something out. And in the end, he got up, he said, I'm sorry, he's about for 2 hours. He said, I'm sorry, everyone, Father has to go to a Vesper session. Everybody, please, you can't see any more people. Can you all go? Mr. Katsogiannis, just sit down, he'll see you at the end. So I snuck in. But when I went and spoke to him, I spoke about many things. A couple of things I noticed that, and it's just a perception, and one thing I'm very good at is perceptions, because that was part of my job, to be able to perceive people and work people out very quickly. You could just see that, just the way he looked at you, you could see straight through you. In other words, this man's already worked me out, he can already see who I am, what I've done, what I'm doing. So I spoke to him about a few things, and one of the things, I won't go into everything I've spoken to him about, but one of the things I asked him, I said, look, I'm thinking about leaving the police force, and going to something else, probably go back in my accounting. What do you think? He goes, straight away, I didn't think. I said, no. He said, you're not going to be leaving. He said, God put you in that position to not only save your soul, he said, but to save the souls of others. So you're going to stay there where you are. He also told me the importance about maintaining the faith. The importance about, if I could mention to you young people, is that about your cross, always doing your cross, how very important, he said, is to do your cross, especially in public. And if you're in a restaurant, you're going past a church, because other people will see that and respect it. The interesting thing he did say, which we had a bit of a chuckle about, was that he said the only people that won't respect you doing your cross, he said, is us Greeks. He goes, missing edge in this. And I just found that a little bit funny the way he said it, but he said it in a different way, obviously. And then he told me about, look, he said, these things will happen, and I won't say what they were, but he said, these things will happen. I didn't take much notice at the time. I thought, what's he talking about? these things will happen. He told me what they were. He said, when these things happen, he goes, it's time for you to leave the police force. Okay? And then 10 years later, those things happened. And I left. I just couldn't believe it. So 10 years prior, he's told me about all these things, which at the time I thought a bit irrelevant for me at that time, but 10 years later, they all came to fruition. So going back to your question, whilst he wasn't my spiritual father at the time wouldn't let me leave either, but the funny thing is that when I came back, and what a friend told me, I didn't say anything to him, but when the 10 years came up and it was time to go and I knew it was going, I knew that my spiritual father here would refuse to let me go because he said, what are we going to do? He said, you need to be here, you need to help people, you need to stay there. As soon as I told him, I said, I think it's time for me to go, he just said straight away, I think so too, you should go. So...
You didn't tell him what Lord Ephraim said? Just an understanding.
I mentioned to him later, after he said it, but I didn't want to say it to him beforehand to influence him in any way, but he said it himself, and he spent the last 10 years telling me not to go. So it was very interesting.
And towards the end of there, when you went and saw Lord Ephraim, like obviously he has this gift of clairvoyance and you could see into the future, and probably, I don't know if you guys know Lord Ephraim from Arizona, but he's reposed now, he's passed away now, but he's on his way to becoming a saint. The miracles he's done in his life and even after his life are amazing, and I think that's a massive blessing you got to see, and it's incredible. At that time, could you, I don't know if you want to share maybe, like what was driving you to leave at the time? Like what kind of particular stresses and that were, was pushing you that way to think about maybe going back to accounting and stuff like that?
Look, there's a lot of factors. I wasn't happy with the way the police force direction was going in. I wasn't happy with. You got to understand that there's a lot of politics in the organisation, and any organisation you go into, whether it's a small firm, a large firm, government, whatever. A lot of politics, and I had a lot to do with politicians. There's a lot of pressure on you from politicians, especially at gangs where we had the shootings. Like every day, the police minister would, he didn't call me direct, which was difficult for me because there was pressure put on about stopping them. There was just many, many other things that happened. The political environment was very hostile. I didn't like that, and it was against everything I believed in. But I think that was really, and some other issues as well that I didn't. Many of my colleagues, senior colleagues, who basically I knew were making fun of me. But the other thing was that, and I say this in a humble manner, that I was basically tapped on the shoulder, if I can say that, because they wanted me to become Commissioner of Police. So I've had a lot of sacrifices to make. That's the highest level you can go, and that was one of the sacrifices I've had to make. That's what I'm saying to you, that if you want to be a strong Orthodox Christian and confess your faith, that's going to cost you. And you're prepared to wear those costs. You're prepared to, fight for Christ. And you're prepared to, confess your faith, because that's what it's about these days. We live in a different generation. We're not strong like Christians of old. We live a very soft life, and one thing that's probably a detriment to all of us, especially for the younger people, is all the Holy Fathers. I've been to Mount Athos a number of times and spoken to some very Holy Fathers here. They all said the same thing: avoid ease and comfort. Avoid ease and comfort. And because ease and comfort make us lazy and make us vulnerable to fall and to sin. And I know from my parents and most of your grandparents, their generation that came out here, you've got to remember they came out from 20,000 miles away, flew out to a strange country, most of them coming from villages, probably never went to school, and came out here. They were made fun of, they were degraded, they couldn't speak the language, and they worked hard. They worked hard for their families. So I thought about that and I said, well, that's what I'm going to do. So what I'm saying to you is you need to keep that in mind, because you need to think about the tradition, you need to think about the generation of your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents who came out here and gave up a lot to help you and your families to become have a better lifestyle, better people. So everything around us, including technology, becomes very addictive, and you really need to be careful about how much time you spend on social media, how much time you have with your mobile phone, because that's a distraction about what's going on around you. It takes you away from focusing on the important things of life.
Just follow us on social media. It's KOY. Yes. No, it's a good point. I just want to ask, did you feel like a prayer life contributed to having peace, away from work? I mean, I guess as a police officer, even, and especially your position, you're never really away from work. Like you told me, you're getting phone calls 2 a.m. There's been a shooting, this and that. How did you stay at peace, or did you have peace? Because we have normal jobs ourselves, and some of us study, and we can't even find peace. And you're getting, threats on your life, and you're dealing with some of the most, disgusting people in the country, basically. How did you maintain some sort of peace? Was it a prayer life, or?
There's a couple of things. For me, and I say this very sincerely, I don't want to embarrass her, but the support from my wife, Emilia, was very, very important. She's such a supporting woman, supporting wife, and we all need that, whether it's your husband or your wife, your partner, whatever. Her stability, calmness, and so forth around her support at the time was very, very important. As Father would know, as Presbyterian, we need support. We're all human beings, we need support. So I wanted to acknowledge Emilia first for all the support she gave, particularly she's in a high environment, stressful job herself, but she gave and devoted the time to me and helped me through those difficult periods of time. But also prayer life's very important. And I remember Emilia saying to me that whenever I became quite anxious, because when I used to get home, things didn't stop. Especially when I was in organised crime squad, firing up an organised crime. We had a lot of ongoing operations which were very active overnight. It could be 12 o'clock, I'd get operational orders coming through, which I had to approve as a commander, and you had to make sure that they were correct. And we had safety mechanisms in to protect my police officers, because if anything happened, and God forbid one of my police officers was injured or killed, I'd be going to the court, it was a death coroner's court, and I'd be getting crucified in the witness box because I didn't make sure that the environment was safe, the operations orders were done properly. So all those things, the shootings and the constant continual emails, phone calls that were coming through was very difficult. At times you could feel anxious and overwhelmed, but when that happened, one thing that Amelia encouraged me to do, but also was something that I learned from my older friend, was to go and say the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me, the sinner. And when you say that continuously, you just go to a room by yourself, you might only say it for 10 minutes. It just helps you with your breathing, just to settle down. Or I'd read, one of the chapters from the Bible, which would help me calm down. And once you've done that, your body comes back and you sort of relax a little bit, because if you don't take that breath and you don't just find that peace for that moment, you can easily go over the edge. And I saw a lot of my colleagues, fall off the edge, have breakdowns, mental breakdowns. I've had inspectors come into my office and close the door and just burst out crying, men, because they couldn't take the stress any longer. And you don't read or hear about that, but I saw these things, and it was very distressful. I saw very terrible things. I saw, when I was just joined the police force, for instance, I was only in the police force for 6 weeks, and I went to a fatal motorbike accident of a young guy who was my age, 20 years of age, and at the time I know I wanted to get a motorbike myself. And this poor young guy had accelerated to go through a set of lights, and at the same time, a little passenger bus with 12 people on board, elderly people going out to a function, turned in front of him, and he was going full throttle to get through the orange light. He went straight into it. And when we got there, he basically, without making you sick or anything, basically his brains were being held in by the helmet. And I looked at that and I thought, I was only 20 years old, I was only in a job for 6 weeks, and you see things like that and you're exposed to it. And after a period of time, you see many of those things, many dead people, murders and so forth. It does have an effect on you, and you've got to switch off. If you don't switch off, that's what happens. You'll go to pieces, and that's why a lot of my colleagues who didn't have faith, who didn't have beliefs, had mental breakdowns. Some of them even committed suicide. So that's the sad reality of it. That's what we face every day. And you young people now have a lot more pressure. Even your school, your exams, the universities, a lot of pressure put on you by making sure you got top marks, making sure you do well. The expectations of your peers, expectations of your parents, expectations of others around you. And sometimes it's very difficult to deal with all of that, and it's very overwhelming. And that's where our faith comes into it, to help us to endure these things and help overcome them.
Yeah, I suppose you don't have to be in the place of in the force and seeing these sort of things to have some sort of level of stress like that in your life. Like you said, you come from work, school, whatever. But yeah, you see grown men break. Like you said, you see. Like I've seen a few guys I looked up to while I was in the job actually ring me up and all part of an incident, crying and tell me about nightmares they're having, and I just, I was a young guy and I was just saying, well, I go to a spiritual father, I don't know, maybe that can help if you see a priest or some sort of religious person you can connect with and connect with God in that way. Because that's what I knew anyway. And would you say it's like your faith was a testament to you not suffering the similar consequences?
It's not about not suffering. I mean, we all suffer in different ways, but I think it's about how we cope. And for me, it was my coping mechanism. There's two things for me: my faith, and also I'm very committed to fitness, and I do a lot of training. When I was younger, I did a lot of training. But now I'm older now, so as an old fellow, I can't train as hard or as much as I used to, but I still train, I still try to look after myself, because what I try to do, and I think when I say this to you to see if that can help you, is because I had a highly stressful job, it was very demanding, and it was also different because the levels up here, like day in, day out, there was no sort of respite, there was a lot of pressure on you, both within the organisation, outside the police, as I said earlier. But for me, I treated myself then as like an athlete. So an athlete who's trained for the Olympic Games or some big event, that you've got to be able to train and to be able to perform and be fit enough to perform at that level. So for me, I look at it this way: if I'm going to do my job at that peak level all the time, I need to be fit, and I need to be able to take it, eat my nutrition. Because I saw my colleagues, the senior ones in commanders, after a couple of years they were gone, and I spent 20 years as a commander. Nobody else spent that much period of time, and it was because of my faith and because of my fitness. And in fact, I remember, probably you guys would remember him because you probably went around, some of you wouldn't have been born, but one of our previous premiers, Bob Carr, and Father would remember him. You're not that young fella. But Bob Carr, I was at a function once and we were having a chat with him, and he said the same thing to me. Because I said to him, you're always going to, called him Premier, you're always going to functions, you're going. And I said, how do you watch your weight, look after yourself? He goes, look, because I tried to say the same thing, because like you are, because I try to keep myself fit. I've got a high pressure job as well, and I make sure that I look after myself so I can perform at a high level all the time because of the demands of my job. So that sort of really confirmed in my mind that I had to do that, because okay, we've got faith, but God's not going to do anything for us. It's like that story that I think some of you may or may not have heard of, is that the man his boat sank and he was in the water and doing his prayers and saying, God, come and save me. And next minute the boat comes past and he said, yeah, okay, you want us to come on board? He goes, no, he goes, God's going to save me, you're all right. Then two other boats came in, said the same thing, and next minute he drowned. And they said, when he went up to meet God, he said, God, I prayed to you, you said you saved me, why didn't you save me? He goes, I did, I sent 3 boats and you didn't go on any of them. So what I'm saying to you is that, do your prayers, have your faith, but it's a dual effort. You've got to do your bit as well. All of us have to do our bit to get through stormy seas, and you'll find that life's going to be full of stormy seas for all of you, for all of us. But the important thing is to be able to be strong enough to get through the stormy waters and the stormy seas, because there'll be a lot of calm as well. As I said before, God won't allow you to cope with anything that is too much for you.
Did you see any, I guess, people you were dealing with in the criminals and stuff like that you were charging or you were in communication with? Did you see any who actually maybe possess some sort of Christian quality or some sort of repentance maybe after the fact, or I don't know, maybe some of these informants who that wanted to maybe change their life? Did you witness any of that? I'm just curious.
Look, there were some people that I did speak to, especially there's a lot of, especially when I was a crime manager at Marrickville at the time. This is going back to it was mid-90s. Quite a few Greek parents came and saw me because they knew who I was in the area, and their children were, drug addicts. They caused them a lot of problems at home, and it was a very difficult time because I went and I'm only saying it to, I don't like saying these things, but I'm saying it to you so you can understand what sort of problems are out there. And I did go and visit them in their homes and spoke to their children. I think of 2 or 3 of them that I spoke to. I found out later the parents came and saw me a few years later and told me that your talk did help them. They did change their lives around, but they were these were people who were going out doing break-enter and steals. They were robbing people to get money to pay for their drug habits. Terrible things for a parent, as you could imagine. They've grown their children up and they're going out doing the things. Some of them have gone to jail. So I felt in some ways powerless, but in other ways, okay, how can I help these people? And I tried to do whatever I could to try and help them and straighten out their lives. But and there was some other criminals that I did speak to. Some listened, but I try to discern who to speak to, because you just can't go up to everybody and open up and say, because we've got to look at it this way: we might be Christians, but we can't. We're not going to just roll over and let people step all over us either. I say that in a righteous way, in terms of, I'm not saying going out and fighting with people. I'm saying is that we're not idiots, and we're not going to be just rolling over because somebody says you're a Christian, you can't do this, you can't do that. Well, there's righteous wrath as well. I mean, we've got to make sure that we defend God's name and defend our faith, not in a violent way, of course, but we've got to stand up for ourselves and for our families when we have to do that.
What would you tell people in those positions that came to you that were struggling with those addictions, and there's a lot of people with drug addictions, like you said, they turn to crime to pay for it. So what would you telling them in those positions? I'm sure some of us here know people who are maybe going down a bad path, and what can you tell them, you think?
Look, each circumstance and situation was different, and I listened to what the parents told me about each of the individual children that were going through the different circumstances. So okay, so whatever their situation was, I tried to adapt to that. I gave them advice about the issues they're causing to their parents, about what the state of the drugs had done to them. And these people, ones that listened, realised that, but they couldn't come off it. Their addictions were so strong, and they couldn't go cold turkey. They needed to be able to get drugs to cut, because they were going through very bad periods of time from withdrawals. So my advice to them is, I said, you've got to help your parents. Some of them, 2 of them actually went in rehabilitation centres, which helped them overcome it. I put a couple of them onto a spiritual father, I'm not going to mention names, that I knew of at the time, that they went and saw. We also helped them along. And just about doing a couple of follow-ups, going back to the parents' homes, speaking to the children again as a follow-up, seeing how they're going, giving them whatever advice they asked, because they were all different. They were asking me different advice, but the thing was that you tried to let them know that it's about their self-respect, told them about importance about their faith, and also the concerns they were causing their parents. And you see some of these parents, I felt so sorry for them. I mean, the mothers were crying every day. What am I going to do? My children have gone down this road, and you couldn't help everybody. You couldn't help everybody, which was the sad part.
I think that's an important part as well. Like, you can't expect for everyone to turn around, and you do what you can, and we let God take care of the rest, I suppose. I just want to touch on one thing you said earlier, which was interesting. You said you did get offered to, take up that position as Commissioner of Police, and I remember us talking about it once or twice at St. Catherine's, but because of your faith, it was a thing where, I guess, would you say you had to choose maybe between your faith and that position? Could you maybe go maybe a little bit more detailed into that? Because I find that very interesting.
I wasn't offered the position. It's very difficult to explain. Top of the shoulder. You've got to have ministerial support and government support and so forth. But all I'll say is, I won't say any more than this, is I wasn't prepared to compromise my morals or my faith to do that job. So what I'm saying to all of you is what I said earlier, is that if you're looking for high positions, particularly in the current day and age, in the current climate, whether it be the corporate, government, whatever sector you're in, if you accept those positions, you're probably going to have to compromise your morals and values, otherwise you won't get there. I'm not saying that it can't be done, it can be done, but it's very, very difficult because the cultures in organisations now are such, and I know I'm talking from experience because I've got friends in the private sector, and I know what it's like. There's a lot of peer pressure put on you to conform with their lifestyles. If you're not part of their lifestyle, they don't want you to be there. As I said to you before, as Orthodox Christians, we want to talk about our faith, we want to talk about Christ because that's what our lifestyle involves. If you don't believe in that, well, your lifestyle's alternate. It may be that, your bosses and the people you're going to be working with are, and I'm saying this in a very respectful way, it might be, gay, and they want you to conform and accept and do all that with those people. They want you to go out drinking or go out, the young blokes, if I say this again in respect, we're chasing girls and women. So this is what you've got to think about. So, well, is this the lifestyle I want? Am I prepared to go down that track and give up my morals, give up my values, give up my faith to do this so I can be accepted, get the senior position, to get money? I can tell you, a lot of the organised criminals these days, especially, it's all about the money. It's all they care about. It's just about the money. And I can tell you, not one of them, because I've spoken to them, even in jails, not one of them is happy with even all the money. They lost it all. And in the end, some of them are serving 20 years in jail, and they've regretted it. Regretted every moment of it. So if you're chasing money, and I said it's like my own children, be careful about chasing money, because if you chase money for your own greed, you're never going to make money, or you're going to have a very miserable lifestyle, because it's not about the money. It never has been. And if I could say one other thing to you, which I used to say to some of the people in the police force, and I say it because we had a lot of corruption, and I spoke to some of the jobs I did, particularly later on, I went to the fraud squad, and we had some major corruption in organisations, is that, I say this, is that evil flourishes because good men and women sit back and do nothing. So all of us have an obligation to do something, and being a fence sitter is not one of them. We can't sit on the fence, and we can't stay silent when we see something that's going on that's not good or is evil, because you're complicit in that particular act. So as difficult as it may be, we have to speak up and we have to do something about it.
Did you see that sort of thing in that life there, where complicity was encouraging evil? Like, I know we mentioned that, like, in everyday life, you've got to speak up, but you've got to stand your ground. But did you also see that in that life, just to maybe reaffirm that message, like people who didn't speak up?
Look, I did see it. People have spoken up, and there's consequences for every action. There's a reaction, and there's consequences for our actions and inactions. So I have seen that people for standing up for their faith, for standing up for corruption, for standing up for very different things, have suffered a great deal. Why some people suffer more than others, I don't know. God knows. But what I'm saying to you, it's not an easy thing to do, to be able to stand up and, say, I won't accept this, because what will happen is you'll be tested in subtle ways. Little hints will be made to you. Oh, what do you think about this? Or what about that? What would you do about that? What they're doing with those type of subtle questions is testing you with you're part of that group, you're happy to hang around with them. If you are, these are the type of things you're expected to do. And that's where you've got to, come to the conclusion as I said earlier, is this really the lifestyle that I want? Is this the direction that I want my life to go to? Because once you go in that direction, it's very, very difficult to come out of it. Because sometimes we don't even know we're heading in that direction. People are doing things because they've been used to doing things in a particular manner, and they don't realise they're doing anything wrong. And I'm talking about many Christians too. They think they've been doing certain things in their life, and I've always been doing that. That's not really, I'm not really doing anything wrong, not doing anything bad, but if you sit down and analyse it, or somebody else is looking at it from a different perspective, and that's why spiritual fathers are very important, they can say to you, hang on a minute, that's not right, you shouldn't be doing that, or, what you're doing is not correct. So it's important to get advice other than what your own thinking is and your own mind is telling you, because if there's one thing I can tell you, and I'll tell you again from experience, is do not trust yourself. Because sometimes you think you're making the right decision, but in reality you're not. So if you've got somebody that's very, very close to you, or a good spiritual father, it's important to discuss those things with them, because you'll know from your spiritual father the right direction. Because even with so-called close friends, I've seen it, there's a lot of jealousy and envy there, especially if you're doing well in a job, in a sport, in whatever, in life. People get jealous. And people who you think your friends who really care about you are jealous about your achievements and what you're doing, and they'll lead you down the wrong direction and all the wrong paths to see you fall and you become miserable like them. So just be careful about that. That's why spiritual fathers are very important, to get that different bit of advice. Sometimes we might not like what they tell us. Sometimes we hate what they tell us. And I've been in that position. I think he doesn't know what he's talking about. But when you go away and you take the emotion out of it and you start thinking about it, you realise that what they're saying is true. It's correct. I am going down the wrong path. What I am doing is wrong. I need to change my ways. But you can't force people to do that. You've got to want to do it. Because if you force people, and if you don't do it out of love for people, and you don't because you want to genuinely help people, well, you're not going to change their lives. And that's why Christ is so important, because everything that he does is because out of love, and he wants us to have our freedom to make decisions on our own. So anything that's forced upon you or forced upon us, many things have been in the last couple of years, you know that's not coming from Christ, because he will not force us to do anything. We all have free will, and we all make our own decisions in this life, and we've got to live by those decisions. But we just got to hope that the decisions we make aren't final, aren't fatal. So it's important not to rush into things, because as young people, I've done it myself, we can act on impulse. That's fantastic, I'm going to go and do that, and you realise, no, I've made the wrong decision. So sometimes it's good to take a step back, think about what I'm going to do, get the right advice from a spiritual father or somebody very, very close to you who's mature and experienced, and you'll know you can trust them, and then decide you're going to do something.
I think that's such an important point, where you said it has to be done with love and that whole thing of freedom. Otherwise, you'll push. I think you actually push people away when it's overbearing and you have no other choice. This is what you have to do. Especially in the Christian life, I think we try to inspire a friend, whatever, to come to church or a family member. Yeah, if it's not done with love and with that freedom aspect, like this is your choice, then you can actually work counter for that, and you can destroy something, maybe destroy a good opportunity.
Just one thing on that, if I can, just very quickly. That's very important, because we all want to try and give advice to people to do something, or we want to correct our brothers and sisters or our friends. However, the first most important thing, and I learnt this from speaking to Elder Frem and a couple of Holy Fathers in Simonopata, I went to Mount Athos, and also Vatupedi. It's important you don't push people in that direction. You make sure that you give them the right advice, but get your own house in order first before you try and get other people's houses in order. And also, one of the questions I asked Frem and his other Holy Fathers in Mount Athos was, what can I do, and all parents have this problem, and you one day will be parents, if you're not already parents, those are a bit older, to help my children. And they all gave me the same advice. It was 3 critical factors. You be the example, always give them true and honest advice, and pray for them. They were the 3 things that the whole 3 elders that I spoke to told to me. So, and I try to put them into practice.
Yeah, definitely. That prayer aspect is, you're just going to tell them to do something without the prayer is going to be empty. So you ended up leaving the police force. Was that a big change after 38 years, 39 years? Did it feel weird? How did that feel, leaving such a big career?
Look, that's a good question, because a lot of my friends couldn't cope. Many of them stopped, and some of them died quite quickly after, within a couple of years. Some of them had no direction in their life. I've got to be honest with you, I knew when I wanted to go, but I didn't tell anyone other than my wife. And I started planning, and I think it's very important that, because it doesn't apply to you because you're young and you're at the beginning of your lives now, but for me, as I said, I've got to plan, what am I going to do? Yeah, I had good jobs. I even said to my wife at one stage, one of the Interpol wanted me to work for them and set up a cybercrime squad over in Paris. And I said, would you like to come? She said, see you later, you're on your own. And there's other good job offers, but you know what? I worked all my life. I worked from I was 12 years old, and it doesn't happen easy. I was a paper boy. I used to go around those days and wheelbarrow around and sell papers. I worked in Grace Brothers, McDonald's when I was younger. I was growing up, and then accounting. I was starting at night, 3 nights a week at uni, and working during the day. So I've done all that. I'm thinking, well, 42 years of full-time work, and since I was working younger, I didn't want to work anymore. And I knew that when I wanted to stop, that I wanted to be involved with the church, St. Catherine's, and Father Ray was there, and time invited me to become part of the committee, which I'm very grateful for, Father. And also, I wanted to put something back into the community. I get a lot of phone calls from different people who know me, especially in the Greek community, where I can provide them with advice and guidance about different aspects of their life, which I do. I do volunteer work. I'm not going to say what it is, but one of them is actually helping here. So that was for Father. But I'm trying to put something back into the community so I can get satisfaction out of it. And I think for me, that's very, very important. I've never have a dull moment. My life's very, very busy. I see my children. My daughters are sitting out here at the back. My other sons didn't come, thank goodness for that. Shouldn't say that. But, I just want to make sure that I did things that I'm not under that intense pressure. And it took me a while. It took me almost 2 years before my body settled down. I was really burnt. I didn't realise how burnt out I was. I was very burnt out. And I realised I was burnt out because when I first became a commander, and I was commander of the Leichhardt Open Command, which is Balmain, Glebe, all that area there, I got a letter from the commission at the time, Ken Moroney, who I'm still very close friends with because I was his staff officer for a while, and he said, Arthur, you've got to take leave, you've got 900 hours leave. And I thought, oh, all right. So my wife and I decided to go to Greece. We went there. I took 12 weeks off, and we were there during the Olympic Games, it was too. And I hadn't been back to Greece for many, many years. And I realised that we were down in Kalamata, and we were sitting at a cafe, and Amelia was looking at me and laughing. And I said, what are you laughing at? She said, you're actually conformed, your body's conformed to that chair, and I've never seen you so relaxed. So I realised at the time is that because you're working in a stressful environment continuously, you just become engrossed in it and you think this is everyday life. But it was only then that I realised that, hang on a minute, I've been stressed to the max and I've just been going through it, ignoring it. And after that, what I did, I decided every year we'd go to Greece for 6 weeks because that was a time out for me. I'd leave. It's the first time I went and took my phone and what a mistake. As soon as I got on the plane, I started ringing. What am I doing? So, but because of my position as a commander, I'd always get somebody to relieve with them, and I always make instructions to him or who was relieving. I said, don't ring me. I'll give you my private email address, but it better be important if you're going to bother me. And it never bothered me. I think once I got an email about something which is to do with a court matter, but other than that, I was just left alone and I was able to relax. And that made a big difference because that was my time out. So I knew I could recharge the batteries and then keep going after that. So back to your question again, it was difficult initially because I said I was burnt out. I really didn't want to do anything. I just needed to just stop, get a hold of myself.
Sleep for a month. Sleep straight for a month.
No,
brother.
it wasn't much sleeping, it was just trying to just slow down. But after about 6 months, I started feeling a bit better, but I said 18 months it took me to really just get over it all. And I don't, I've got to say, I'm saying this in a nice way, I don't miss it. A lot of my colleagues want to just join other police officers, so I don't miss any of that. I've got a lot of friends outside the police force. I like to be involved with the church, and what I want to do now is strengthen myself in my faith and try and help other people as much as I can who are worse off than me, because really we don't know how lucky we are here in this country. We've got everything in front of us. We've got your home, you've got a roof over your head, you've got food on the table, most of you got work or you're studying at uni, you've got good homes to go home to, but there's many children who are suffering. I've seen it. Children who are exposed to pedophilia, children who are abused, children who are hungry, children who are killed by their own parents, and it's something that really knocked me around, seeing a lot of that, because you can deal with adults, but when it comes to children, and we all, I had my own children at the time, it was a very, very difficult situation. So we need to be grateful for what we've got. We need to be able to thank God for everything that we've got, because everything we've got is because of Him. None of this that we've got, we've done it on our own. We don't think we have. We don't go around and say that I'm this or I'm that. I've learned the hard way to try to be humble, even though I'm a sinner and not a good person. But I try to be a good example where I can to other people, because if we're not good examples, you can say whatever you want to say, but it's through your actions that people are going to notice. There's a lot of words being said out there, especially by some of our politicians, but the follow-through is the actions. People see you're doing, I always call it this way, if you're walking the walk and talking the talk, people will notice. But if you're just talking the talk and not walking the walk, well, people are just going to say, this bloke's just, well, she's a hypocrite. What they're saying one thing to us, but they're doing something else. So it's important that if you're going to say something to people, if you're going to say that I'm an Orthodox Christian or I'm going to be doing this or that, you follow through with it. You're going to say something, I'm going to come and see you at this time. I was always make sure that I was punctual, always make sure that I was going to follow through with somebody, or if I help somebody else, I'd call them a few days later, everything all right, how's things going? So those little touches are very, very important. People want to know that they're loved, people want to know that you care about them, even with the criminals. I've noticed if you treated the criminals fairly and you spoke to them nicely, they respect you. They speak back to you nicely, but unfortunately many younger police, and I say this in a respectful way, many younger police don't know how to talk to criminals. And instead of calming the situation down, they antagonise it and get the criminals to be very uptight, and then next minute they ended up being in the blue together because they didn't speak to them properly. And I saw it many times. I went out myself in the street. I used to grab one of my sergeants, my inspectors, and I'd go out and I'd talk to them. I even watched my constables, the way they spoke to people, and I thought, they're not talking to people properly. Again, it's an extension of society, and I must say, not blaming people, the younger people, but a lot of the way that communication now is through the social media, through the mobile phones. I used to get young constables or young detectives who were in their early 20s who would be sitting in a partition next to their fellow officer, and they wanted to communicate with them. They'd send him an email. I used to show them how old school, call me old dinosaur. I used to get up and I'd go to the back of the room if I had to, where our squad was, or in the command. I'd go downstairs to the police station and I'd go and speak to the officer face to face, so he understands where I'm coming from, so I'm communicating, so he can see my face and my eyes, so he knows he doesn't misinterpret, or she doesn't misinterpret the message. Because through emails and social media, even though you might have had good intentions, people, the way they read it might be different to the way you've actually meant to send the message. So, that's very important, that face-to-face communication,
Social skills.
very, very important.
We'll just do maybe a few quick questions and then we'll have something to eat. Does anyone have a quick question for Arthur, perhaps? Don't be shy, that's better.
Hello everyone, I'm Peter. Arthur, actually, the first time I met him, I remember he was in his police uniform in the church. The first time I had his eyes on him, and automatically I thought, what a beautiful role model to come into the Greek Orthodox Church with his uniform and all his badges on. I thought that was a very respectful thing to do, just for us and all his peers. I've been a long time friend of Arthur, and he's been a great role model, and he should have been the Commissioner of New South Wales. And I know he's humble about it, he doesn't want to say, but common sense should prevail.
It would have been good to have a Christian one of us up there.
Not good, wouldn't have been good for my soul, Pepper.
It's nice to have youths have a community too. I think community is important, especially at St. Catherine's. We all see each other each week, the services, and you can be a part of your own church community as well. We all keep each other accountable, and it's a good network to have. Yes, Father.
I've experienced Arthur's journey. Seeing him as being involved in the police force, and then seeing Arthur and Amelia coming to St. Catherine's, and seeing Arthur's character evolve and his ministry in the church. I think, as Arthur said, everything is meant to be. And in fact, I'm glad that you didn't take that higher position, because I think you would have maybe compromised a lot of the things, the morals that you feel very strong about and your faith. And I think you're going through your next phase of doing your ministry in the church, being the parish president at St. Catherine's and working hard there, helping Father Stavro and before helping myself, and being a good role model for all the parishioners at St. Catherine's and out of St. Catherine's. We've brought you here at Cobra Church, and Arthur will be speaking to our adults as well in a few weeks as well. So I'm sure that Arthur's ministry will not end here tonight. God knows what else He has in store for you.
He's the
Might even wear
commander
one
at
of
St.
these. God, if we have to do anything about it.
Do we have any questions from yes?
Excuse me. My question is about judgment. I'm just trying to think of how to frame it properly. We have, I guess, an important belief, if you call it that, judge the sin, not the sinner. I think for us, we experience it at a more micro level or on a day-to-day level. You spoke a bit about social media. I think very much so we're taught to just see the image of people, and that shapes perceptions and stuff like that. What I would ask is, from your experience, seeing that at a more extreme level, people commit atrocities, stuff that negatively impacts the life of other people. How did you navigate a path of still removing the I guess, instinct or desire to judge that person and maintain through your faith, I guess, a position where you are still showing love to the people that commit the terrible things you probably saw?
That's a good question, and it's an interesting question, because we're all human, and through our human nature we want to judge people. Some of the people that I saw, if you saw what they look like, oh my goodness, this bloke's this or that, the tattoos, and especially with the bikies and some of the organised criminals. Some of them, I've got to say this, that some of them that I spoke to actually had a pretty good heart deep down. I think they're just on the wrong track. I remember one guy, I could tell you a lot about this guy, but I won't, because I can't, because this stuff's not even revealed out into the street. But this guy here was dragged into the Comanchero, different reasons. He just wanted to get out, he wanted to help people, he wanted to help the police. He was torn, and you could see it in a. I invited him along to come and talk to a group of young police. Some of them, really have got good hearts, but feel that they've been dragged somewhere I can't go back. and they haven't got anyone to go to get the direction. But there's some people that are very, very evil, and I'm talking about real evil, and there's nothing you can do to change them. But judging people, I'm telling you now from experience, is one of the worst things we can do. We should never judge anyone, because I'm now talking about myself being the worst of the sinners. It's not good to judge. And I remember speaking this about with my spiritual father, and he said to me, be very careful, he said, Arthur, about judging people, because when you judge somebody else, he said, God, we've got grace. God will draw his grace, and you'll have a fall. Something, you'll experience some very difficult times. So we should never judge our brothers and sisters, our fellow men, because we're not in a position to judge. Only God can judge. What we can do is show through our actions and our love for them to be able to try and help them, if it's possible. Because some people you can't help, as I said before. Some people, and I've seen it, are very, very evil, and these people you can't help. They need to be locked away, because their desires and their passions to do evil to people, especially young children, never go away. And the only way you can help them is by locking them up. So I hope that's answered your question.
George, did you have a question?
You mentioned earlier that you were able to flip the switch in a way where you were either like seeing traumatic events or just pretty much transitioning from work into your personal life. Would you just be able to elaborate more into how you were able to do that, just to turn off like that part where, when you, I guess, feel things, or in terms of not be able to take that back into your personal life, whatever that might have been in those situations?
Yeah, George, that's a good question. We're all different. For me, I knew that if I didn't block it out, I don't know, it's about a mechanism, I blocked it out. Because if I didn't do it, like some of my colleagues couldn't do it, and they just said they finished on a scrap heap. For whatever reason it was, I was just able to block it out. I didn't want to think about it. The only time I was ever really affected was when I was a detective sergeant at Bankstown. I got called to supervise and look over a sudden death syndrome. Little baby died. It was a Middle Eastern couple, and they had their child, who was only 18 months old at the time, in the bed with them. And the father was a big man, rolled on the child, not knowing he was sleeping at night, and suffocated the baby. And when I went there, because I had my children, my daughters, who was at that age, to come into bed, but that shook me for a while, because I looked at the poor child, I saw the parents, they were in grief and stricken, and they were crying, and the poor little baby there, that baby was blue and purple, and we did an investigation just to make sure that it wasn't done deliberately, which we found out through the investigation it wasn't, but you could see at that stage, for me, when it came to children, it really affected me. And I remember telling one of the deputy commissioners at the time, when they said to me, I want you to go and work here. I said, I'll go and work anywhere you want me to, especially in the State Crime Command, which had all the squads. So we had all the really elite detectives and commanders in there. I said, I won't go to child abuse, because when I was relieving up and as an assistant commissioner, I used to see all the emails and the inquiries that came through what happened to children. One area that I really didn't want to work into. So to answer your question, I was able to do it. I just switched myself off. Sometimes you could. Sometimes it took you a few days. You'd come over and it'd be playing in your mind, it'd be like a video recording, it'd play over and over and over again. And you try to cut it out. But that one, with that particular incident with that child, really knocked me around for a while.
Maybe one more question. Yes, of course.
Add as to how you relax, because basically you mentioned the training earlier, and I don't know that a lot of young people in the room who train. I'd ask you, what music do you listen to when you train? Because my husband listens to chanting.
I didn't always do that, but I do now.
But you do now. So about a mechanism of relaxing, that's what my husband does as far as what he listens to when he's training. So I thought I'd just put it out there.
In fact, it reminded me that she's right. That for me, George, I know you train, for me that was a big coping mechanism. Because if when we were stressed, we just want to just relieve that stress with something. Some people want to go out drinking, some people want to just be all by themselves. We all got a different way of dealing with it. For me was, I've got my own gym. I was fortunate enough to have my own gym in my garage. I'm sorry,
Yes, my cousin.
darling, you have to keep your car outside. but I can go into the garage, I can shut the door, I put the Byzantine music on, and I can just train hard, and all my stress and anxiety I can release in there. So that's my coping mechanism, and it did help me. My faith as well, but being able to, from a physical perspective, is to be able to train. That's why I said to keep it training, as I said to you before. It's very important to keep yourselves healthy and fit, eat well, and train. And when I say train, not about training to, okay, we all want to look good as part of it, but it's not about the ego. It's about making sure that you don't overdo it, because we get into, you can cross the line. When I say cross the line, I've seen it, especially a lot of criminals who, abusing of steroids, peptides, all this other stuff. But you won't be able to control anything, because I've seen the way they react. It affects their minds and their brains. They're very aggressive, very angry. They can't control their emotions or their anger. So, and besides, for you people that are here, us as Orthodox Christians, our body, and you've probably read it and you've heard it before, is the temple. It carries our soul, and our soul which comes from God itself. So if we abuse our bodies, we're basically abusing our souls and disrespecting what God's given us. So by all means train, by all means, I'm a big believer to be natural, eat well, do things for the right reasons and the right ways. So but those things are very important, because if you don't do it for that way, if you don't do it for the right reasons, you've got to love what you're doing, because I've seen many people start, and Peter Pepper's over there, he's a personal trainer, and you see people come and go, but it's about doing things that you can cope with. As I said before about losing weight, if you do it too quickly, you're not going to be able to keep the weight off. So if you're going to engage in something like that, do it because you like doing it, and do the things you like doing. Some people want to train in the gym, some people want to go for a walk, some people want to go for a swim or cycle. Do whatever activity you do, but do something that's going to help you to calm down, to relax, and it's also safe and good for you.
100%. And have fun. Yeah. If no one else has something quick, yeah, Chris. Does someone else have their hand up as well? No, Chris. Go ahead.
You said a bit about peer pressure and how at one stage in your life they choose when you can frame like the worldly things and Christ your faith. How could you advise us who are much younger how we could not compromise in our faith and our morals? Say something that like a situation that would be a bit smaller, like an everyday thing.
Look, it's not easy. What did Christ tell us? He said that the path to salvation is a difficult path. It's a narrow path, and it's a difficult one. These things here, it's about now. We're in the days of confession. When I say confession, confessing our faith, and it's not like, as I said before, where generations ago the martyrs would be killed and they'd martyr for their faith. Martyring for your faith today could be confessing Christ, can be not compromising your morals or your values when you're under extreme pressure, peer pressure. The people say, come on, we're going to go out drinking tonight, we're going to go chase women, or something like the young people do today. I'm sorry I'm using those expressions, that's what happens. And you've got to be able to be in a position to say, well, no, I'm not going to do it. You've got to remember, you're not going to be liked, you're not going to be accepted. Remember what Christ said, that I'm living in the world, but I'm not of this world. And for us, we're going to live in the world, but that doesn't mean you have to be part of the world. What I'm saying, part of the world is to do what the worldly things are. Because if you do what the worldly things are, you'll be accepted. So when everybody loves you, and everybody's patting you on the back and saying what a good people you are, it's because you're conformed to their way of living. What we're saying is, no, there's going to be pain there, and we're going to do a bit of suffering. And if we're going to suffer for Christ, that's what we've got to do. We've got to say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do it. We're going to fall, but we all fall every day. But we've got to get up the next day and do it all over again. It's a new day. Have a good spiritual father and go to confession trying to go to church regularly, commune whenever your spiritual father tells you to commune, because what I've found is with communion, and it's very difficult, and I'm not here to advise you, but I found that communion gives me strength, because that's, when I say communion with God, we're talking about communion, taking his body and his flesh and blood. And that, I thought in Greek it's called enosis, Christos, so in other words, become part of God. And that's a slow process. You're not going to do it overnight. It takes many, many years. Some people, holy people, can do it straight away, but for us, it'll take many, many years. And for you, this is the path and the process that you've got to put into action to be able to get there. It's a lifelong journey. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So we do it, we fall, we get up, we do it again, and we try to make sure that you know what's right and wrong. All of us, we've got a conscience, and the conscience tells us what's right and wrong. So if someone tells you to do something which is not right, for a start, you will know that it's not right, and then you've got to make a decision. Do I go down that path, or do I hold on to my values and my morals and not do it? If you do go down that path, it's important that you get up quickly, recover, and refocus. And that's what we do at work as well, because we make mistakes. That's how we learn as mistakes. Young people in particular, mistakes. If you make mistakes, don't worry about it. If we don't make mistakes, you're not going to learn. It's through our mistakes that we learn. And if you're not prepared to learn from your mistakes, well, you're never going to learn anything. Does that answer your question?
All right, can we give a round of applause, please? Just want to say again, thank you for coming in, giving your time, and giving such a unique talk. I suppose we've never heard a talk like this before, and I think it's a unique perspective. So I hope everyone got something out of it. I definitely learned a lot, and I think that last thing you said, I think everyone should take that home at least. Is if you fall, just get up again, because we're all going to fall, and you're not going to go through this life not sinning. It's the way it is. That's our sinful nature. We're going to keep falling, but like Arthur said, just keep getting back up, So Father had to leave, but let's all stand up and we'll do a bit of a prayer together.